Hello, and welcome to the Wild Wild West podcast. My name is Richie Riche of the MHRT Network. Apologies on the background. My green screen has been packed away because I'm in the middle of selling my house. So the last thing I want is a massive green screen here in the basement. So I'm doing the best I can with what I got at the moment. But it will be returned back to normal, hopefully in a short order. Over that away, per usual, is the real Alex Gibbons. You can catch him on Arrowhead Addict. And I keep on saying this every week, but man, the season is coming up right quick.
We're in the final month.
Yeah, exactly. Like 1 month, and we're basically there. And we're gonna be getting right into preseason games pretty soon. We're going to have some pretty interesting discussions there in terms of what we see. So some real meat and potatoes in terms of the upcoming 2024 NFL season is coming up quick. So in terms of Alex, you can kind of catch his stuff there. And obviously the Lightning Fast Fantasy podcast on Lockdown Defense. You can catch that on the YouTubes, etc. And down that away, is Monsieur Jack Kenna representing his Las Vegas Raiders. Jack, again, love the fact you're here on the show, bringing some historic knowledge as well as roster depth and all that kind of stuff to the table here for those that are Raiders fans that are joining us live this evening. So our main topic here is going to be unexpected or folks that we may not have thought would make the roster for our various teams. And this is kind of preemptively kind of a bit of a way too early predict because we haven't got preseason games and those sorts of things. So it will be interesting to take, say, this episode and last week's episode and then apply them over what we see in preseason to see how accurate or inaccurate we have been as fanalists here as we assess our teams. So I'm going to throw over to Alex. We'll start with your Kansas City Chiefs, kind of discussing who you think might be an interesting piece there in terms of that might make your roster. And just real quick there, Jack, obviously there's been some folks here that are making some comments about what we were discussing backstage. So I'm glad that I echo those same things. And I had no idea that you made Fox News, so congratulations.
It's not the way I would want to make the news, that's for sure. And
I agree, but at the end of the day, everyone.
Thank you, Jeffrey, and everyone else.
Everyone's home safe, from what I understand, so that's a good thing. Obviously, not an experience that one would prefer. However, I'm glad everyone's home safe, and that's really what matters.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously the first responders. We're no holds barred to try to, get them home safe too. So I think credit goes kind of to those that, went above and beyond to make sure that everyone involved was home safe. And I think that's a, really
double salute to all those gentlemen and ladies that participated in, getting them out of there. A lot of them were volunteers and also the sheriff department, Cal Fire, you guys were all on it. So ultimate respect. And I know us as parents, we're going to do something for them. I don't know what yet. And kind of the wives are kind of handling that type of stuff. So yeah, it's been a kind of crazy couple of days. So Raider Nation, I will say that I'm probably not as prepared as I normally would be. So I apologize up front if some of my answers may not be exactly what your answers are, but I would love to hear all the Raider Nation fans, your thoughts as well, and who you think it will be, because I like getting your opinions.
So we're going to leave that up whether or not Jack wishes to share that news publicly on the podcast. That'll be his choice and his decision. He can choose to or not to. That's perfectly fine. What? Go ahead.
Okay, then I'll share it. I don't have a problem sharing it. Okay. So my son and 12 other boys, they go do a backpacking trip every year up in the Sierras, and they parked. They started hiking in. Literally within about an hour or so of being in on our hike, a wildfire happened. It's Royal Gorge, California. So if you want to look it up. And so they started seeing the smoke, the flames, and they're like, oh, we can't go back to the vehicles and get out of here because that's where the fire's coming. So they just kept doing their hike and just going, several extra miles. God bless the winds were mild, because if they would have been kicked up and blown their direction, who knows what would happen. So one of the parents, the fire department found the cars where they parked in a trailhead, and they looked it up and they found one of the parents and contacted the parents saying, hey, there's a wildfire out here. They had a sat phone, which wasn't communicating. So we're still trying to figure out what happened there with Garmin. But it was big enough to where that night they sent in a plane, probably did about 80 loops with heat. It's got heat sensors, but the rocks up in the Sierras are also hot too. So they weren't able to locate them. Again, worried just, again, if winds pick up and starts going their direction, are they going to be able to get out of there? Do they know where they're at? What's going on? The kids did, but you'll see a lot of the reports. They were saying like they're hikers and they're missing. That wasn't true. This is their third annual trip for this. So they know the area and the terrain pretty well. And they ended up staying the night, in the area has less vegetation, and they hiked a couple extra miles to get away from it. Next morning, they sent in a helicopter, and they found the boys sleeping. And then, of course, when they pinpointed the location, they're like, hey, because again, they think like they don't know what they're doing or can get out on their own. Then they sent like search and rescue in to go and get them. And then they got them and they brought them back, and everyone's safe. That's the only thing that matters.
That's great.
But yeah, it was a crazy couple days. As parents, I got like no sleep.
Oh yeah,
sure. Imagine.
And of course, your natural instinct is throw boots on and go.
Oh yeah, we did.
Yeah,
we all went up. We went up I kind of watched the Cal Fire because I was thinking they would find them, and then send somebody in that night. So I went up got up at like 5 a.m. I went to bed at 4, watching the Cal Fire plane just circling and circling and circling. And when that didn't happen, I'm like, okay, I got to get at least an hour sleep, because it is like an hour and almost 40-minute drive. So I wanted to get at least an hour of sleep, and then did pack up the boots and went up there, and every other parent was out there too. So it was pretty awesome in the way of the response that, everybody put into it. Not just from, Cal Fire, the sheriff's department, the volunteers, but also all the parents were out there too.
Yeah, well, that's they say communities are kind of what make or break kind of livelihoods and all that other kind of stuff, and it's nice to see that there seems to be a pretty solid one surrounded you there. So that's a good thing. So,
thank you.
Yeah. So obviously, as Jack just said, guys, this is targeting those there in Raider Nation. Start dropping some names that might lend Jack a hand, as you can add or supplement kind of what he's already looked up and whatnot. And these would be kind of flyers, maybe like undrafted guys that you think may actually kind of pop in preseason, or maybe a second-year player that was on the practice squad that you think might pop onto the 53 this year. Those are the types of things we're talking about on today's show. So leave those names and your suggestions there in the chat. Jack can add those into his commentary. But in the meantime, we're going to delve into the Chiefs, reigning Super Bowl champs, attempting to do what has never been done before in the NFL, which is a three-peat. And Alex, I'm going to see who you think may make that roster for your team, and kind of go from there.
Yeah. So I mean, really, I don't know if there's anyone that's going to be a surprise, like make the roster be a huge difference maker in terms of like just blowing onto the scene, like Puka Nacua or someone like that. I mean, obviously, Worthy's, I'm sure they're going to slowly get him into the fold and utilize his skill set, but I don't think he's coming on and like putting on Tyreek Hill numbers. And a lot of the other guys were more depth pieces, if you will, that they drafted were more depth pieces and just adding to the competition of basically replacing L'Jarius Sneed. With that being said, I do think there are a few that, obviously our viewers that aren't Chiefs fans aren't going to know who they are, but I think they will be, for a Chiefs fan who looks at the roster and knows kind of the ins and outs of who's across the depth chart, there will be a few surprise guys that I think will make the team that maybe would have been kind of on the cusp and will have a larger role just with how things are. And the first one that comes to mind is actually a former Raider, and that's Neil Farrell, who's a D tackle that I think they traded for last year, like a 7th or 6th round pick. And he was kind of when was he drafted, Jack? Like, not crazy.
Just like 2
early,
years ago.
Yeah. And that's kind of, that's the type of guys that Veach targets from other teams in kind of a low risk, potentially high reward situation where he gets guys that, someone else maybe drafted higher and he just dumps some day 3 draft capital in to bring him in and see if, a change of scenery can do something. And I think they actually traded for him like week 1 or week 2. So he kind of, I think last year was somewhat of a wash for him. But, everything heading into the full brunt of preseason, you see a lot of rumblings of just praising his work ethic and kind of how he's taken that step forward this next year after being in the locker room. I mean, basically for a full year now. And, he's not taking over Chris Jones' spot. But I did talk last week about Derek Nandi and how, he was brought back on a 1-year, like, hey, we're bringing the band back together type deal. But he wasn't, he was more of a run stuffing, first, second down option. And so I think that if someone comes in and shows they can do that and then some more, that he certainly is kind of at risk to lose the role that he's had, since they drafted him five plus years ago. And so I think Neil Farrell, just from what we've seen, up to this point, is doing all the right things to be put in that situation. So it's really, that's one to certainly watch that I think could end up grabbing a bigger role than a lot of people would expect, once we get into the preseason, if he keeps doing, what people are saying he's doing after watching, the kind of the shell period of this, preseason, where you don't really get to assess the guys in the trenches too much other than just the effort they're putting in and if they know what they need to do. So, everything you've seen, he's got the phase 1 complete there, and now we'll see if he kind of puts it all onto the field. But that's certainly one that I think would be a surprise contributor, for Chiefs fans. The other one, I think, and this is just more just kind of my gut feeling, I think if you ask any Chiefs fan, there'll probably be 50-50 on whether Luis Zammit, the rugby player, will make the team. I swear, stuff I watch, there's the comments go ham on saying, like, there's no way a guy that's never played football is making it over someone that has. But then I'm like, well, I don't think the Chiefs would give him the type of contract they gave him and bring him in just to do that. And I think that, I've said it multiple times, but I think with the change in special teams and just the athletic skill set he has, I think there is position for him on the team. And I think that, just with how, I guess, the narrative is right now with Chiefs fans, that would be a surprise one, just because a lot of them are so adamant that he's not making it. And just from the stuff that I've seen in comments, Mahomes even goes out of his way when he does interviews to talk about how impressive he is and how impressed he is with how quickly he's picking things up. That kind of tells me, that's a person they plan to utilize. How, I'm not really sure yet, but I think that's another surprising one, in that you have a guy who's literally never played football. It is going to make, arguably the best team in the league right now is 53. I think could be a pretty good shock. And with that, I think there's kind of just a log jam at the end of, I think Pacheco and Clyde Edwards-Helaire are certainly locks to make the team. And now you have this battle for a 3-4 spot. And I think, LRZ gets one of them for sure. And then the other kind of surprise guy is another running back, but I don't know if, and he's an undrafted one. That's Carson Steele out of, I think, UCLA, who's a pretty quick, shifty, but also kind of a ground and pound, like kind of has it all. But I see him more
as him over the other guy.
No, this is what I was getting to. I think that we see the Chiefs keep an extra running back, but more from the mindset of going back to that fullback kind of utility position guy. And I think Carson Steele kind of fits that mold. Like if you go watch he knows how to pass block. He's big enough that I think he could take on, fullback responsibilities in certain roles, but also athletic enough to be a weapon. I think since Burton went to Denver, 2 years ago, the Chiefs have not had a rostered fullback. And I think that's just with kind of the logjam we have, the amount of undrafted running back or ball carrying type guys they brought in. I can see that being a kind of a change to, how this roster, at least on the offensive side, has been constructed. And, that Carson Steele could be a guy that makes the roster as kind of the RB/fullback role. But, one that we haven't seen in the past couple years. And you've seen Andy Reid use like McKinnon in a fullback position and things like that, which are more with those types of players. I think it's more telling to the defense of what that person's on the field to do, where if you get someone that's more of the traditional fullback mold, I think makes things a little less unpredictable. So that's certainly one that I think will be interesting to watch, as we get into preseason games and see, how early and often they give him opportunities, especially I think in the first game. That'd be a pretty telltale sign of whether, that's kind of the direction they're leaning. So that's kind of, offensive side. Defense, I don't know if there's really, like I said, any surprise guys other than Farrell. Curtis Jacobs, another undrafted middle linebacker out of Penn State, who going into the draft, I think was getting like 3rd, 4th round grades to get picked, and for whatever reason didn't. I haven't looked too hard into why not. But athletic ability off the charts, fits, type of guy Brett Veach goes for at the end of drafts and undrafted, signings is, which athletic freaks are out here that may not have put together very good football tape, but we can maybe get something out of him. And he kind of fits that mold. And, I think that there's a spot for him to fit behind Bolton in the linebacker rotation. And if you go watch his college tape and what he brings to the field, if he can take that to the next level, I see that, being a realistic opportunity for him. So that's kind of looking at the Chiefs. I'd say that's probably about 3 to 4 right there that I named would be, I think, surprise guys. I don't think that they really carve out, like I said, any like huge game deciding type roles. But I think, they all will play an integral part in what the Chiefs are trying to do this next year and bring a little different flavor, so to speak, to the Chiefs offense, or just add some, good young depth to the defensive side of the ball. Can't be too mad with that.
Mm-hmm. And also I'll piggyback on, Neil Farrell for you, Alex. I'm actually, kind of surprised that, the Raiders trade him because, John Jenkins is 35 years old. He's a younger, nose tackle, and coming out of college, he had the highest rated run, grade. So coming out of college that year. So I think he was a 4th rounder, I think, for us. And then after that, they did Butler after him. So I thought that was a pretty good, trade for you guys, actually. I wasn't so happy about it. So, but he's definitely going to be only a 1st or 2nd down, nose tackle.
Yeah, he's 4th round pick out of LSU. Okay. So, but like I said, though, that's exactly what Derek Nandi does. And Derek Nandi, I think's 32, and they just signed him back on a 1-year deal. And I think if Farrell can maybe he has in the year he was there, but I think if he can develop a little more sharper tuned pass rush skill set, or just 1 to 2 moves that he can use, that I think opens the door for him to take in the kind of step into Nandi's shoes and not only take over that, but also a larger role, because we don't really use Nandi when it gets to third down or passing scenarios. So,
well, there's a couple. So I've kind of a comment there and a question about Zemet. So I'll start with the comment there.
yeah,
Well, you have a couple of guys on your roster who are showing to be quite good at the pass rush and getting to the quarterback. Obviously, the one that is best suited for Farrell is to basically attempt to plug into Chris Jones's brain.
Yeah,
and just download, like
he's
Matrix
just follow him
style.
around like a little
like Matrix style. You know what I mean?
He's nipping at the ankles.
Yeah. Like you're basically wanting him to come out of the meeting room and be like, I know pass rush.
Yeah.
And kind of end up in that way, right? But so that would be certainly a benefit because you have a similarly positioned guy who is best in the league at this point. I think is probably a reasonable and fair comment to make as an interior pass rusher right now as of today. Now, in the next year or two, that could change, just like Aaron Donald kind of got dethroned in some regards by Chris Jones.
Yeah.
Chris Jones could get dethroned by a younger dude that's coming up in the league. And as Shannon Sharp will say, Father Time is undefeated. And
unless you're Tom Brady,
unless you're Tom Brady, at which point, you have the avocado toast kind of gives you the extra few years.
Yeah.
But
the avocado toast.
Yeah. But aside from that, I think that's a great situation for him. But the question on Zamet is, you made a comment about Steele, for example, who you think is going to be probably maybe bulked up or some variation of it, and will fill in like a fullback / running back role. Do you see Zamet potentially doing, I'll call it a similar role, except between wide receiver and running back? Like, do you see him? Because that's the benefit of a rugby player who is in the league
absolutely.
that he was in, is the dude's got hands and not just like, not bad. Like what most people don't understand who watch football is the rules that the NFL has about like no touch after a certain number of yards or whatever. They don't exist in rugby.
So he is the king of contested catches.
There is no.
There's no PI.
Don't touch that guy.
Player.
Fair
game at all times.
And even some of the things that you would expect in football, for example, that are penalties are not actually penalties in rugby. Now, some of them are deemed like no things to do, like just like, it's kind of accepted not to do the thing, but there's no rule against it. So you're going to see it happen a whole bunch and no one gets called. One of the things is a jersey throw is completely legal in rugby.
What do you mean by
so
that?
Like you can grab a guy like this and like hammer throw him to the ground.
Yeah, I can't do that.
No. No.
It's a good old-fashioned horse collar.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, I definitely, from what I've seen this so far, like that's why I made sure to kind of talk about Carson Steele in a different light. Because I think that, Zamet, I think, is going to be the like quote unquote fourth running back that certainly from what I've seen, they're giving him reps at slot. They're giving him reps at, returning kicks. And I'm sure teaching him the ins and outs of every other special team, role. And that's why I think that he's going to be a player that makes a team from the mindset of playing special teams and probably returning kicks, or at least, having that at the start of the year. But I think you also see Andy Reid find ways to sprinkle him in to get, 1 to 3 touches a game, whether that's some sort of screen out in the slot or a handoff or a pitch, whatever. I think that, he's definitely got enough athletic ability that if he can just utilize this preseason to kind of get brought up to speed or make them feel comfortable enough that he knows what he's doing, I think that only, builds on the amount of opportunities that he gets in live game action. But yeah, I definitely see, because I just think it's like I thought maybe he would be in that type of role too, because you think like Rugby certainly he could probably catch on to blocking schemes pretty quick and handling that. But then at the same time, it's just I don't know if that's too big of a plate for someone who's also trying to
It
learn.
is.
Like
No,
so that's why
it is.
that's why I think that they would keep someone like Carson Steele, who could probably take that role on a little easier because he's at least familiar with all the pass blocking terminology. And I think he even played fullback to some degree at UCLA too. So, I think he just is better suited for that type of role. And who's to say? I mean, we might go play this back at the, once they do make the cuts to 53 and Carson Steele didn't make it and Chiefs don't have a fullback again. But I just something just tells me that's, with how many running backs they brought in, that's something that I think Andy Reid, if he finds the right guy, is open to adding that back to the roster. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, I don't see Zamet being in that type of role. I see him being more of like, you're our special teams guy, and we're gonna, find every week in, week out how you progress, find a way to get you an offensive touch or two.
Yeah. And just to again, being that this is kind of my sport, albeit I played British rules. He was Aussie rules, but there's tremendous overlap. So it's not like it's not like I watch the Aussie rule game and be like, what's that? But
it's not like the MLB to the Savannah Bananas, right? Like
no.
Like, yeah, it's like it's like still kind of the same game.
Yeah. So when you so Zamet, for example, would make a great slot receiver. He would make a great kind of change of pace / even a guy that could kind of fill the. I keep on hearing like McKinnon and stuff like that kind of getting brought up. I see him as kind of the guy that could probably fill that kind of a role because he has a combination of speed, but then he's also used to getting banged up. Like, like he's used to kind of, and catching it, right? Like, and actually catching it. So the big difference in the Aussie rules versus British rules is they're used to kicking the ball and having to catch it like after it's like knocked, head over tail sort of thing. So he would be a perfect special teamer in the new. I mean, like
my thought exactly,
like exactly. But the one thing that he would never have done in Aussie rules, based on his position, I believe he was a halfback, if I'm not mistaken. Which means, so when you look at the way the rugby team is constructed, there's the dudes that are in the scrum, and then there's the guys that are kind of in the row to the right. They almost never block.
Like, I think he was in the row.
Yeah, like that's not their jam. Like their jam is not blocking. They were not in the scrum. They were not in a position where they would have broken even away from the scrum.
He was a wing.
Oh, yeah. So, yeah.
Wing / fullback.
Yeah. So those guys aren't typically asked to do a tremendous amount of blocking. Now, there's going to be a few plays where he would have probably kind of joined the pile to push a guy through and that kind of stuff. So it's not like a bridge that far that would be a huge stretch for him. But to your point, though, like the dude's trying to learn a brand new sport at the highest level possible.
Yeah.
For a team that's got a target on their back, where you're going to be going against the best of the NFL just based on your schedule because you've won the Super Bowl. This is probably not the time to start saying, hey, we want you to keep Mahomes upright. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a big ass.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I agree with
probably also happy I got all this extra armor on me. Like, I should go crazy.
Right. Well, yeah. You never know. I mean, that's the way I kind of looked at after watching him on rugby. He somewhat brings like, and this is definitely out of pocket, but I guess just from my mindset of like what I think he could bring if it all came together. Like, I feel like a rugby player somewhat brings to the running back position the same skill set that McCaffrey has, in that they are like quick twitch, make one cut and get north, but can also be a threat in the passing game. That's not to say he's going to come on and be McCaffrey, but I think that's kind of the skill set they thought they could potentially get out of him. If he can come in and catch on to everything pretty quick.
Kind of like a Darren Sproles.
Yes, like just like
Dylan Laube.
Yeah.
That is
like your third down, change
yeah.
of pace, but is also a threat in the screen game or just and if they're playing deep, which is like basically what McKinnon brought to that role for the last 2-3 years. I mean, hell, he caught 9 receiving touchdowns 2 years ago. And a lot of it was from defenses just being so afraid of getting beat over the top that he's wide open underneath and was a big enough athlete to make a play happen. And I think, that's something that he brings to the table too. If he doesn't get too bogged down with all the, learning the ins and outs of football.
He's got to get out of his head and get to a point where it's automatic.
Yes.
As opposed to where he has to think about it. And the other thing that will be interesting in preseason is if Andy Reid makes an intentional decision to basically play him, like not just keep him with the 3s or the 4s, but to play him with both.
I could see that.
And I think if he chooses to play him with both, like both the 3s and the 4s on your team, I think your prediction is exactly correct. I think his point there is get familiar with football because our plan is you're on the 53.
Yeah. I wouldn't be shocked if you almost see him play damn near like the full game, and get one opportunity, one touch, however it is with the first team or second team. And then, you get to that when it's to the point of the 3s and 4s are in, he's more of like, all right, like you're running back. Here's the 5 plays we're going to do. And let's see what you got. Cause I think at least one preseason game will be like that. Cause I mean, you're going to have to give it a full, almost a full game just to see how he does, in every sort of situation.
And the other thing to keep in mind is fitness and his endurance, I guess is the best way of putting it. A lot of football players, just because they don't watch the rugby side of things, because it's on at weird times and it's coming from Europe most of the time, right? Those guys play a full 90-minute and they don't stop.
Yeah.
Like there is no stop. There is no.
It's kind of like soccer.
Yeah, it's like soccer. You're always running. And so think of football where you have the physicality component, right? Because that's what rugby's like. Except you just don't ever stop.
They don't measure the chains.
They don't have these like timeouts.
Yeah, it might be a walk in the park. They're like, what is this? A TV timeout? What are we doing?
Yeah. And so like as an example, like even at my playing weight, I struggled to keep my weight at 240, 245.
Yeah,
like it was
running around
because I was just running around like pure just up and down. And so like it is hard to keep your weight up when you're playing rugby. Like that's why that dude from that Philadelphia Eagles, the rugby player there,
Mulatto,
like that's why he's actually bigger now than he was when he played rugby, because he's not moving around as much as he used to.
Yeah, he's a big boy.
But he's a big dude.
Makes sense.
That's a big guy. So, Alex, I think that's a really interesting cross-section of your team. You've kind of covered off some interesting, folks. I'm going to jump into my Denver Broncos because I think there's some interesting folks that are going to make the 53. Some which you guys may know, some which you guys may not know. I'm going to cover off kind of the lower end or the back end of the roster type guys that most of you may not know their names, because I think that's really where it's going to be more interesting. And I think some of them will actually be contributors that are going to be surprising. Like I think there's going to be a few games you're going to catch a few of these guys and be like, okay, wait, I know that guy. I heard Rich made a comment about him on the Wild Wild West pod kind of thing, right? So I'm going to just kind of throw out a couple names just in the wide receiver room, just so that we can kind of cover those guys off. I think Devon Vell is going to be one guy that will be making the 53-man roster. He was a 7th-round draft pick. He is a tall, big guy, very similar to like a Tim Patrick, for example. and I think that he's a guy that could make kind of that one of those last spots on the 53-man roster. To be quite honest, it's probably between him and Lil Jordan Humphrey, who really did a great job for our team last year. But, he's several years in the league. He's kind of followed Sean Payton around a little bit. And so if you can get a younger guy that can kind of backstop Tim Patrick and Cortland Sutton, who I think Sutton is probably going to be traded at some point this year in the early stages as soon as an injury happens to some other roster. I think Devon Vell can be that guy that can step in to be that other big body, that other guy that can kind of go up and get it, run decent speeds, and all reports coming out of camp and all the other kind of early activities from like the rookie mini camps and stuff in the earlier part of this offseason are that the guy picks up stuff quick, like real quick. And that's a good thing because as a rookie, if you can pick up on the playbook that quickly, just as we were saying about Zamet there, you're then no longer thinking, you're just doing.
Yeah.
And then, and then you can really start to show out when you're no longer having to say, oh, that's a this. Okay, I got to do this. I got to do that. You inevitably fail when you have to go through that in a football playbook. All information that I have on him is that he has come out and really done well there.
It sounds like he's already higher up on your depth chart already. If the news is talking about these guys, then they got a great chance.
Well,
it's the guys that they're not talking about.
Not only the news, but the head coaches.
Exactly.
But like I was saying, like this is not like as an example, right? And then so I think he's certainly one. I also believe that so long as Jalen Virgil is healthy, I think that he's going to be making that roster as well. He's a guy that I really, really like. And honestly, if the team cuts him, the Chiefs, as much as it pains me to say it out loud,
he fits him. Yeah.
Like they should be like Veet should be calling like exactly 1.5 seconds after he's cut from the Broncos.
Hey, I thought the same thing with Hamler, man. They didn't do that.
No. Hamler has a Hamler string problem that doesn't stay healthy.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
He's kind of like our tight end there in Dulcich, who is for all intents and purposes, until proven otherwise, is Mr. Glass.
Literally.
Yeah, literally. I mean, he looks like Weird Al. He's got that look, and it's great. It is. Don't get me wrong.
Got the Jerry curls.
Yeah, love it. He's got the mustache and like the long hair. It's fantastic. Love
letting his soul glow.
Yeah, but aside from that, man, the dude just can't stay healthy. Like if a D tackle or linebacker looks at him sideways, his knee, seizes up on him and he's in the blue tent, right? So that's a problem. So I have Jalen Virgil, I have Devon Vell as kind of two guys that you may have heard of or you may not have heard of, but they're from my Denver Broncos that I think you should probably pay attention to because I do think that they're probably going to be making the roster. I also think there's going to be some churn of guys on the Denver Broncos wide receiver room to continue to push forward with this new gritty style of play that Sean Payton is trying to instill and put in place with the Denver Broncos. He's trying to move away from the finesse, treat guys with kid gloves kind of look and feel. And he's trying to instill guys that actually want to play a contact sport that we all know and love called football. And that this is not ballet. This is, you're going to get hit, so act like it. And I think that that's part of the reason why you're seeing I'm trying to find a nice word because I actually like the guy, but I think that's why you're seeing kind of an indifference when it comes to Cortland Sutton and his threats. Is I think that the team and the coaches are like, okay.
Well, I think you kind of basically have two other Cortland Suttons in the room, so it's like we don't need you, but
we don't need you to do that, and like we're paying you more than these other guys too.
Yeah, exactly. So another guy that I think you should be paying attention to is Alex Plazowski. I kind of mentioned him last week in terms of in terms of the depth and some other things there. I actually think that he's a surprise guy that again he was an undrafted dude, college free agent who really did well in preseason and kind of had a fluke injury and got hurt. I say fluke injury because it's not like Dulcich where it's like, every 5 seconds the guy's hurt. He had a real fluke play where he actually got hurt. And then he was ready to come back, I believe, at one point last year. And they said, no, we want you to completely and just beyond a shadow of a doubt, come back healthy. And I also believe that he's one of the reasons why we didn't go crazy in the right tackle spot, because I actually think we believe that he could be maybe an answer for us at that position if he kind of shows out in preseason. And they're going to use preseason, I think, his to gauge his water level, to see where he's at.
Mm-hmm.
And then we get to some real interesting ones. I'm going to kind of go through. This is one that I know is near and dear to Jack's heart, and that is Estime. I think he is going to be a guy. We drafted him this year, but I think that we're going to see potentially a complete overhaul, possibly, of the Broncos running back room by the end of this, by our cut downs this year. I think I'm going to be disappointed to see Symposium go. I actually liked him as a running back. He was certainly our best running back last year in terms of production and the way he played, and he kind of just was consistent. He was just that guy for us. But I think that so long as Estime kind of does what I believe he can do and plays as advertised, I think that he's going to be a guy that can kind of step in and kind of do all the things. And I think that if he is also as advertised, he will probably do the things better than Javonte Williams did last year, attempting to do those same things in a Sean Payton offense. We obviously have Jaleel McLaughlin, who I don't believe is going anywhere. I think he's kind of proven himself and certainly had some great production last year. And then an unknown guy, perhaps, or known guy, depending on how big of a fan of college football you are, Blake Watson was a very highly rated running back coming into the draft and managed to get all the way through and become a UDFA college free agent that the Broncos picked up. The Broncos have a storied history of keeping college free agents, especially at the running back position, on their roster. Look no further than Jaleel McLaughlin, who made our roster last year from the same, vantage point.
He has a similar game to McLaughlin too.
And so, does he maybe try to get stashed on the practice squad? Maybe. That, in my mind, would then mean that someone like maybe Symposium or Javonte then makes the roster. But I could see him kind of being the full overhaul where Williams and Symposium go, Estime, Jaleel, Watson stick around with a fullback in Michael Burton. So you kind of have an interesting blend and mix there, which could be a way we're looking to kind of, it's an interesting blend. Like I actually think that could really make us a pretty dangerous running team in Denver.
Absolutely.
I'm just looking. I didn't know Watson only played 5 games last year and he scored 7 touchdowns.
Yeah,
that's wild.
That's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
So he's a guy that I think should be on people's radar, but it's a question of how he shows out in preseason for the Broncos, and he could well show himself a spot on the roster if he continues that trajectory that we saw in his, obviously production last year in college. And then Lavelle Bailey, onto the defensive side of the ball now, is an inside backer. With the injury to Drew Sanders, who and the fact that we're quite thin in that position group in general. He's also someone, Jack, who you're mentioning, that if their names are mentioned both in the media and by the coaches, probably a good idea to pay attention to them. He has been singled out in no fewer than 4 pressers by Sean Payton stating that he is in the mix to be a potential dot in the linebacker position.
Wow.
As a college free agent, which
undrafted. Yeah.
That's impressive.
That's I'm sorry. Like,
you can't get a higher mark than your head coach giving you that praise and saying we might give you a dot. That's for sure.
Yeah. So, I mean, like you take some of the stuff because it's off season and sometimes the coaches try to, throw in
hype
some
guys up,
hype guys
motivate
up, you. But you typically don't get an undrafted dude getting mentioned more than once in a presser, and certainly not being mentioned to being the mic by the head coach, especially someone like Sean Payton. So I think that should say something. Yes, this is Tim Patrick, Toe Tap Timmy.
Timmer.
Makes me think of like an Irish jig or something he's going to do.
Certainly of the existing and remaining receivers on the Denver Broncos, certainly my favorite guy. He plays the game differently, my kind of style, my kind of way. Never heard of her, eh? Yeah. Well, if you're a Raiders fan, you should know exactly who Timmy is. He has certainly shown out. Some of his best games are against the Las Vegas Raiders.
Timmy.
And in terms of some other folks, there's a bunch of flyers at some other spots and things like that are going to be interesting. Another guy would be there's going to be some toss-ups at, say, like the right guard position, but I don't think there are anyone to really kind of write home about in terms of, that they made the roster, or they made the roster. I think Frank Crum might be someone that makes in at a right tackle, just because tackle is such a valuable position, and if he can also play and be cross-trained, if you will, at, say, like right guard as well as right tackle, that could make him an interesting prospect for the Broncos. If someone like that. You also have Calvin Throckmorton and Sam Mustapher, who are center guard kind of prospects that are going to be some interesting guys that, again, Broncos fans barely know their names just because they've had a quick mention here and there. But those are guys that could well make the roster and bump out other guys. And then I actually do think that there's going to be an interesting battle at the center position for the Denver Broncos with the departure of Lloyd Cushenberry, because I think Luke Wattenberg is probably the guy that's got more experience and is probably going to look slightly more polished in some regards. But Alex Forsyth is Bo Nix's former teammate. And so I think that if Bo Nix is slotted in, say, with the twos, as an example, during preseason, Alex Forsyth and him together will probably look very good, just because they have all the, lingo down. They know kind of their tells, and they have kind of their own little, they've just been doing it together. Like, that's the one thing that you look for in the league is, can the quarterback and the center gel? Look no further than Peyton Manning and Jeff Saturday, just as like an example. And yes, Jonah Ellis is another one. I don't see him as a surprise though. I'm trying to give guys
third round pick.
Like, he's a third round pick. Of course he's making the roster. Now, some of the other guys I mentioned, like, I'm talking guys that are in the 7th round. I'm talking guys that were in the, undrafted class. And some of these guys that we got as undrafted dudes, I actually think will make the roster over some of our drafted players. And sometimes that's just the way the boards land, where you're able to bring in undrafted guys that show out. And sometimes the drafted guys just don't elevate themselves enough to take over a role from a veteran that's been on the team before. And I mean, I predicted CJ Anderson making the roster like 4 days after we drafted him as an undrafted free agent. And I mean, he's a household name. He's a household name in Denver at this point. And it's the way he runs the ball. There's certain running backs when you watch them, and CJ certainly had this. When he got hit, he didn't waver. He got hit, and he kind of just like did one of those, and he always kept that level plane when he got hit. And I think that's a huge benefit for someone at the NFL level as a running. So, anyways, that's who I kind of.
I really want David Sills to make it.
I'm sure you do. No.
Dude was the beast at West Virginia.
Yeah, I don't think he will. If I remember right, he came to us last year.
Yeah, he'd been around for a minute. He was because I think he played. I think his last year at West Virginia was like 2017. But he was the like 8th grade quarterback that verbally committed to USC when Lane Kiffin was the coach, and then went to West Virginia as a quarterback and ended up just roasting people as a wide receiver.
Yeah. So he unfortunately, I think he just becomes an above average body. An above average body. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So Jack, over to your Raiders. And who you think is going to make Cowtown, you did mention another guy, and I did forget to bring him up. So thank you for that. I actually did have Yasmin making the roster as well. I think he is Yasmin or Yasmin, whatever. He doesn't have an E on the end of his name, so I'm just going to, cut it off. But he's a guy that I watched some tape on. He's kind of the type of dude that Peyton really likes. He can block a little bit, but he's great at finding the end zone and got good hands. I see him as a guy that's going to be competing and probably rising up, and I think he's going to make probably a few plays in the latter part of games that'll rise him up the depth chart pretty quick to kind of force the team to get him to play with the twos, if I had to guess. And if he can, I think that is going to all but solidify his spot on the roster, because we're not deep at tight end. And with Dulcich, who's probably going to get hurt, the first time he sees the field, I think that's just going to happen. So Jack, over to you and the Las Vegas Raiders and where you're at.
Hey, salute all the guys that joined in the chat late. Good to see you all. So I'm going to start off on the offense. I think, somebody who nobody probably knows their name unless you're a Raiders fan is Zamir McCormick. Only if, again, they're going to the running back by committee now, because you don't have Josh Jacobs. He's been on the practice squad for a couple years. And everyone's been, wanting to see what this kid can do. And it really depends if Laube really does take over that third down position. And again, we talked about it last week in the way of Abdullah is kind of one of the guys I see going out. And if they don't want to keep 2 third down running backs, then I see Zamir has a chance to make the squad. And I think a lot of the nation would like to see it. We'll find out in preseason what this kid's got. But he is a player that we've all been talking about, and we're kind of excited to see. So I think he's got a shot. Again, it depends on, everything always depends, guys. You know this. How many they're going to keep at each position. So don't know a ton of them, but I heard he's fast. He's like a well-rounded back. So, but he's not one that's going to break the starting lineup by any means possible. And then I'm going to move over to the offensive line, who was a backup last year at right guard, was Jordan Meredith. So we've seen what he's done, but when you bring in like Cody Whitehair, who comes from Gillespie's system, he's got a couple Pro Bowls under his belt. And then you bring in Pete, who's got 3 Pro Bowls, and they slated him at left tackle and left guard. So that kind of leaves Meredith kind of out. So he's kind of like the third, guard, going into this. So I'm curious to see like if he can actually make the squad. But we saw him play last year. He was okay. You know, it wasn't anything special, but he's got the potential to be to make the team, depending on how many they keep. If they want 8 or 9, depending on what they want to do, because they did draft 2 offensive players this year. We got, you know, of course, JPJ in the second round, which he's going to be a solidified starter at the left guard. And then we got our swing tackle and Glaze, which he'll either go left or right. And then I think, you know, Dalton Wagner, I don't think he's like really a tweener. I mean, some people would say, because he was a UDFA last year, and then he got hurt and stashed on the practice squad all season. But he is a pure tackle. Let it go left or right, but they're slating him for right. I see him making a squad. So I think, you know, Jordan Meredith is going to be an interesting, you know, conversation there for the Raiders to have that, because he does have time with the team and he did play last year. So it'll be interesting to see with him. And then going over to the defense, again, it's about, you know, how many guys you keep. I'm looking at now the 2 most stacked positions on the Raiders team, and I'm going to go D-line. So, you know, Alex, you talked about Farrell, which I thought was interesting. The Raiders traded Farrell, but they kept Butler. And he was 1 pick later in the 5th round, and the Raiders kept him, which I'm kind of surprised. You know, then last year they draft Young, who never made the starting squad or anything like that. And was it what's his name? Nation, help me out. The kid from Arizona that we got in the 7th round. So that's another guy. So it really depends. It's like you got McCall.
Nesta J.
Severa. There you go. You got Nesta, you got McCall, and then you got Butler. And I think all 3 of these guys are there. They are fighting it out to get that spot. So any one of them can get it. I kind of think McCall, you know, is got kind of a leg up a little bit, just for the simple fact that Jenkins is 35 and he's the only other pure nose tackle on the team. All the other guys are DTs. So I have a feeling that they're going to probably want to keep and develop a nose tackle. You know, I think this will probably be Jenkins last year being at 35, and who knows if he can, you know, handle the whole season in playing that role. So yeah, like a Butler would be one. And again, Severa, 7th round pick, and Severa got on the field more than their 3rd round pick in Brian Young that they got out of Ohio State. So, or it was Alabama, not Ohio State. So it's going to be one of the defensive tackles that it's going to, between those 3 that can make it, because they got to cut someone. They can't keep all these guys. There's just no way. And I haven't heard anything special about any of them going through the OTAs and so forth. And then the last one I have is going to be, again, we talked about cuts. So I can't see, you know, my Raiders, you know, keeping more than 4 safeties. So I think Chris Smith, you know, I talked about cuts. I think, you know, he was a 6th rounder last, you know, year. And I think he might be the odd man out. I mean, you just look at their starters, Morig, you got Epps, and then you got Polamalu, you know, again, related to Polamalu. And then you got Trey Taylor, who's, you know, related to the guy that was on Baltimore. So I think those guys are going to solidify. So again, how many safeties are you willing to, you know, keep? I mean, usually teams don't keep more than 4. So I think it would be.
No, you're forgetting the special teams rules now.
Well, if you want to keep them for special teams, then yeah.
No, but it's so the question that, like, what used to happen before is you used to keep like an extra corner, for example, because of special teams, because you wanted a guy that was quick, or you keep an extra wide out because you wanted a guy that was quick that could act as like a gunner down the field or something along those lines. However, with these new rule changes, I think a safety, for example, or even a defensive end or a tight end who is quick, can block, can tackle, etc. Those are the types of guys I think in the new rules that are going to be kept as the extra spot for special teams exclusively.
Well, here's the thing with Smith. Smith is not fast. Smith is very like a tactician. He's a guy that pulls angles, but he doesn't have a lot of speed. And for that reason, right there, again, I'm putting him as, you know, again, he could make it, but then I look at what the Raiders drafted. They drafted fast defensive backs this year. There was their fourth rounder. Oh, and Richardson. I mean, he's a perfect Al Davis guy. Height, weight, speed. Super big, super fast, super tall. And then they also come back in the seventh round, and they also drafted another DB in Devonshire. Both those guys are way faster than Chris Smith. So, but again, he's got a year under his belt, being a safety. But I just think, again, how many guys are going to keep at each position? And he has the potential to make it. Again, he's not that speed guy. He is the more, I choose the right angle type player, and I'm going to, hit it that way. So special teams, I don't think it's going to be his gig unless he's going to unless he learns how to block, unless he learns. I know he can tackle, but I think there's a lot of guys that can do that for him. And then the very last one, let's just talk about defensive ends. So again, Jeffrey brought this up, and that was a good point. He brought up Mari Gaynor. We kind of heard some things coming out of camp that he's been pretty impressive, and Jarius Robinson, who's had some troubles this year with the law, but he's got a lot of talent too. So it'll be really interesting to see these guys. So I'm just kind of putting them up because there are multiple guys that can make it, but that they have to go against each other. So it can be a coin flip on some of these guys. It just depends on how they perform in camp.
Camp will be one thing, but I also think that will be a huge tell is going to be when they go against quote unquote live bullets in preseason games. And this is why,
absolutely.
And this is why I know the players, especially veterans, are not a huge fan of preseason. That's fine and good, but it is so valuable for these early and kind of rookies and undrafted players and that kind of stuff. I mean, to be blunt, you have multiple household names and Hall of Famers now who would never have been able to get to where they are right now in terms of how they're thought of in the football world if preseason did not exist.
Oh yeah, the training's so different. If you go back in time when they had the double days, going out there when it's like 103-degree heat and they, not in a controlled environment. I mean, those days are so different than we are now, which is kind of interesting. Like, I just saw something today on NFL Live with DeMonte, and he's got some camera crew going around with him now and like he's videoing him, like going through his weekly progression of they're going to go through practice and the study sessions and to show everyone how it's kind of done. So I thought that was kind of cool, and I can't wait for that to come out.
Well, it'd also be interesting to see how much of it they edit out.
Well, I'm sure they're going to edit a lot.
Yeah.
whatever DeMonte you don't want to see, it's gone.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
No. But I mean, like, they're not going to show the playbook.
Well, I'm sure they're not going to show that.
Yeah.
It's going to be like a lot of stretching, running,
Yeah.
Was he? Isn't he on the receiver show? That I think came out today. Isn't he on that?
Was that that might be the one? I just saw it. It's like I was watching NFL Live
show
at my lunch break, and they just had him on, on NFL Live, and he was talking about it, and they just did a quick clip of, following him around and like, just kind of saying, hey, on Monday, we're doing this. We're going to watch some film.
Yeah, he is on that.
Yep.
So the Netflix show, I think it just dropped today.
Oh, okay. Then I got to check it out.
So last year they had the quarterback one. This year, receiver with Devontae, Jefferson, Kittle for some reason, Debo Samuel, and St. Brown. So if it's like the quarterback one, that's going to be a pretty sweet show. Pretty insightful.
That's good.
Yeah. So I wonder who else is going to be on it. Just, that will be fun.
Well, it'll be interesting to see how much they're allowed to show.
I mean,
right?
it's shot like the quarterback one. It's shot pretty like Hard Knocks style. So I mean, you see some stuff to some degree. But a lot of it like just follows that specific player. So you also see some more personal stuff, more singular, I guess, to that person. But yeah, I think you see more than you think you would.
That's good. I mean, that's good. So it gives you some additional insight in terms of, the meetings, the coaches, the other stuff. Although I'm sure the coaches are mindful, just like all players are, of when a camera's on, that means that whatever they say on film there can and will live on forever.
Never know, man. You ever watch Last Chance U? Those coaches didn't give a rat's ass. There's a camera there.
Yeah, but so that's interesting. And unfortunately, Robert can't make it this evening for this show. But next week he will be back with us in full force. But the Raiders are in an interesting spot as well, Jack. We've spoken about this a few times on the podcast, which is your coach knows who he had on the roster because he was with them for the entirety of last year. And so he knew all the guys, their skill sets, their weaknesses, etc. He had was able to absorb all of that firsthand. So now the question is, how many of those guys that were on the roster is he looking to cycle out and kind of bring in some of the young drafted guys to replace them with? And how many of those kind of, we'll call them veterans that were on your team, will be surprises for Raider Nation to see go?
Well, that's kind of what we just talked about. It's going to be the defensive front. I mean, they got so many guys. It's their deepest position by far. So you can't keep all those guys. So again, the Nessa Jays, the McCoy kid, which again, I think he's going to make it. But nobody really knows about him. But he's like really the only nose tackle that's a backup. So I think he's got a better shot. Brian Young was like a total as a 3rd round pick. Never saw the field. So it's like we all wonder. It's like, is that really just a bust pick? And will he go? So it's going to be those defensive players are really the ones that are going to have to look for their jobs and really make a statement. Because after, you got Max on that front line, and then we got our defensive tackle has got the same mindset. Those kids got to step it up.
Yeah,
they really do. So that's going to be the interesting part to see who makes it from the bottom, part of that roster.
Yeah. I think to look at it too, like, you had all those, especially the like Brian Young and Butler and Silvera. I mean, you guys went out and got basically Miami's defensive tackles, as free agents. So like, if those guys were performing well enough, you wouldn't have shelled out that money. So
exactly,
writing's kind of on the wall for them.
Yeah, and you keep drafting. Those positions. So they definitely didn't find what they were looking for, but I think they finally got it in free agency. But one other thing I thought was interesting. You mentioned the head coach. Devontae came out and also said on, I forgot that gal's name. Oh, geez. Yes. He went on her show and he talked about that. He sat down and had dinner with Mark, and, he said he wanted AP to be the head coach. He didn't come out publicly or anything like that, but, he had that private conversation. So yeah, I think, after Max being public about it, I think it was definitely the right move. So, and we'll see what, AP can do. We're all very excited over here in Raider Nation to have him as our head coach. And let's see what he can do now that he is the head coach and he's getting the players that he wants around him and the coaching staff that he wants around him. So we're hoping for a big turn. We know the record's probably not going to be, it's going to be similar, maybe, hopefully a little bit better than it was last year, just because, the AFC West is a tough division. And we've talked about this on several shows. The NFC North, they are going to be a whole different ball of wax as well. So it's just going to be a fun and exciting season, and we're going to see a lot of smash mouth football.
Yeah, well, you got to remember between what you just said. So that's what 6 games, just with the AFC West. right?
Yeah.
6 games just between us, right? So it's
Well,
like
us three, and then you got to add the Chargers in there too.
Well, no, but like it's you.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Never mind.
That's 6 games total, right?
Mhm.
And then cool, and then you have the AFC North, so that's going to be another 4 games, right? With each of those, so, I mean that's 10 games of a 18 game season, right? Well, 18-week season, 17 game season, and so you're talking of what you just mentioned. That's the majority of your season.
Absolutely.
Right. And so I agree. I think just with our games and what you just mentioned alone, you could forget everything else.
And I saw the standings for the NFC North. They had Cleveland coming in last at 8-9. I mean, dang, if you're coming in last and you're basically a 500 team, wow.
Tough.
That's pretty stacked.
I think that Cleveland is in an interesting spot because Deshaun got hurt last year.
Yeah.
But before he got hurt, he was actually playing quite well. And so
I think
still
made the playoffs with Joe Flacco. So
yeah. And so I think that'll be an interesting one. I do question whether or not Cleveland is going to be that low, because if Watson doesn't get hurt,
they had the AFC North, I think, had 3 teams make the playoffs last year, right? And the Steelers, Ravens, and Browns. And then, I mean, Bengals, only Burrow was hurt. So it's like you add that to the fold. I mean, that only adds to that's definitely going to be the toughest division that the AFC West has to go against, no doubt.
Yeah.
And they're all, I think, at least for the Chiefs, a large chunk of it, I think they play Ravens week 1, and then the rest of them are all like back to back to back in December.
Yeah, and that's going to make it even harder, because that's when those teams are built for that time of year. Those teams are built to get into a slugfest kind of thing in terms of, big bodies, cold weather, running the football. They're constructed for that type of weather because they have to play through so much of it.
Well, that's a good thing for both your teams then, because you guys are built for cold weather as well.
Yeah, the Broncos
play the Dolphins in like the coldest playoff game to date, I think, or one of them.
Yeah. And the AFC West right now is in an interesting spot. Like we're probably another year or 2 out from being able to be spoken of in a similar way to the AFC North, because our teams need both another draft or 2 to kind of build up the core of our roster, and then we also need those same drafts to build out the depth on our rosters as well. The AFC North has just been so stable. All of the ownership groups in the AFC North, for the most part, have been very stable and done very well drafting, even if they haven't been, perfectly stable, but they've done very well drafting. And they've got solid rosters and solid teams. And most have found their quarterback as well. So it's not a question mark.
Yeah.
I'm not popping that comment up, Cowtown. So no.
Yeah. So I do think this season is going to be very interesting. Curious as to DZ, just happened to notice you as a Chargers fan. Who do you think might be a flyer in the Chargers to make the 53-man roster?
Good question.
A wild Chargers fan has entered the chat. Come on, DZ.
Jeffrey, I agree with your comment, but I will remain consistent with mine. I am hoping and praying some more that we do not play him week 1 and try to start him like, say the Texans did with CJ Stroud or something like that. the problem is, it's not that he can't be good or maybe won't be good. It's that you're asking a quarterback, which is, I still agree with this, I think is the hardest position to play in all of professional sports. You have so much information to digest in such a short period of time and try to do so perfectly. You have no room for error, really, if you're going to be honest. That I think it is that difficult a position. And it's not just that it is a mentally taxing position, but it's also the fact that there's a physical element to it as well to go with the mental the component as well. So you have to have both on point. You have to be mentally strong, you have to be mentally sharp, and you also have to be physical. So you have those three things that must pair together. Mahomes was able to do it, but he didn't start right away. They waited to play him as a starter when they were already a lock for the playoffs. And they had Alex Smith that was there, and they played him in the very, very last week of the season.
Yeah. And I mean, I think one unique thing too, looking back on that situation, is, Alex Smith handled it very professionally. Where like you see like with the Titans when Levis came in, Tannehill's like, it's not my job to teach him things. You see a lot of QBs take that approach. But then
Aaron Rodgers for sure.
Yeah, and then Alex Smith was like, here's everything I know. Like,
yes,
what just keep and so it always blows my mind when you think of like rookie QBs and just like how all the stars have to align for them to take that, like, progress their career. Otherwise it's almost halted before it ever takes off. Because honestly, like, I know Mahomes had crazy arm talent coming out of college, but he wasn't this like can't miss. He wasn't looked at like we looked at Andrew Luck or Caleb Williams. Like, he was the perennial number one can't miss QB. And I don't know if he goes to like the Bears, and is thrusted in immediately, if he turns into the same Patrick Mahomes that we know today. So that's why, with so many rookie QBs, like I don't understand why teams don't take a more patient approach with them and, understand I'm drafting this guy to be my guy of the future, but the future doesn't have to be right now.
Right.
And also Alex Smith was like probably really happy going, yeah, we're going to the playoffs. Yeah. Why do I need to play that last game? We already secured a spot. So
right.
I'll take the rest.
Right. And the kicker there is you're allowing the young quarterback to digest NFL players and the pace of the game, but without being put in a position where they are
have to make the play.
Well, they don't have to make that decision. They don't have to make that play, but they can live through it. They can go through all the different stuff, and they're then able to go back and see if they saw the right play without making a mistake. Because then you don't get like a Zach Wilson situation. Zach Wilson,
yeah.
No, Zach Wilson, but who's the other guy? The Jets.
Zach Wilson.
Sam
Darnold.
Sam Darnold.
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 They literally did. They did that twice. Two QBs
back to back.
They took like second overall, and they were like, "Oh, this guy sucks." Like, I don't get it.
Yeah. So,
and think about it too. How perfect it was for Mahomes. You're going into a game. There is absolutely no pressure. Win or lose, they're already in the playoffs, and he knows he's not going to start the playoff game. We're going to go back to Smith. Just go out there and let's see what you can do, kid. Win, lose, or tie. It didn't really matter. It's just about getting some experience.
No, I agree. I agree. The experience piece is extremely important. Sports Nonsense, thank you for coming in and dropping the comment. 100% agree. And you're right. Peyton Manning does say experience is the best teacher. Now, there's the three things I mentioned earlier, right? Are you mentally strong? Right? That's one. Are you mentally capable of processing things quickly on the field as a quarterback? Because that's equally as important. And then you have the physical gifts in order to throw the ball at the right spot with the right time. Well, Peyton Manning checked all of those boxes, despite the fact that he still holds the rookie record for interceptions. A record that every year when a guy got close, he's like, I'm just hoping someone does worse than me.
Like, come on.
Yeah, come on.
One more.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But Peyton Manning is one of the very few young dudes who started right away, with the exception of Russell Wilson, who's also another one who started right away in his rookie year. Unexpectedly, but he did, who have actually won a Super Bowl. And the problem is, what you're talking about is you're finding the exception to the rule, not the rule. And that's my point, is I don't – look, can Knicks be the exception to the rule? Maybe. Sure.
Anyone.
But why would you want to push a quarterback to try to be an exception when you have Stidham under contract for the entirety of this year, who I actually think is going to look pretty good in a kind of an unchained version of Sean Payton's offense. And then you have Zach Wilson, who I actually think is going to look a lot better with the Broncos than he did with the Jets. And so you have two competent quarterbacks that can allow Knicks to learn, and then kind of put him in near the end of the season, or if you have a big lead in a game or two or something, to get that experience, which I agree with, but not put him in a position where you're going to kill him. Mm-hmm. That is something the Broncos have never done, and we need to start thinking long-term player development. I'm sorry, you need to. And
that's what I was getting at.
Yeah.
Is like, I feel like a lot of teams now don't, if it's a bet, like if we had a QB today get drafted 1 overall and break Peyton Manning's interception record, the whole offseason would be like, maybe they move on because he clearly doesn't, he can, and it'd be more of a 50-50 shot. Whereas in 98, 99, like the Colts sure as hell were like, no, we got our guy. We just need to build around him. And I think that's what I was getting at, talking about the different scenarios is, these teams now are like, we got to draft this guy and he's got to be Patrick Mahomes right now. And we have to win, or we're moving on next year, or, we're firing the GM and coach and they're going to want to move on. And so it's just like, I feel like in the last 10 years, we just seen this kind of switch in teams like saying they want to build, but not building the way that you really should be. Or like, I look at I think the Bucks were like the last team to kind of stick with their QB that they drafted in Winston. And like, he was putting up stats, but he clearly wasn't the guy to take him to the next level, but they built the roster around him and then moved on from him. And brought in Tom Brady, but I mean, he was at least able to make it a Super Bowl winning roster. So
but Brady would not have been Brady without the roster that they already had in Tampa. Like they had
exactly.
They had a spectacular offensive line.
What I'm getting at is they kept Winston through his rookie deal and built around him, rather than like, I'm going to go draft this QB again, like another first round QB, and then figure out which one I have and go from there, which I feel like we see more teams do now. Like,
there's only one Tom Brady, right, Alex?
Yeah.
So not every team gets the opportunity. Like, as if they didn't get Brady, then maybe they might have started going looking through the draft. But when you got Tom Brady saying, "Hey, I will play for your team," well, shoot, that's a no-brainer. Come on over, Tom. We'll take him.
Yeah.
Bye, Winston.
Yeah.
See ya. He's in Cleveland now, I think.
Yeah. But Alex, you're 100% correct. And then the other piece that a lot of folks aren't paying attention to when they look at these quarterbacks is, what have the teams done prior to their arrival? So it's not just, is the quarterback good, yes or no? Should I throw that quarterback in, yes or no? It's, have they built up the offensive line? Have they built up enough skill position guys to allow that quarterback to have folks to throw the ball to, or run the ball, or help them, or whatever the case may be? Have they done enough things in order to allow that young rookie quarterback, when they are inevitably thrown into the fire, to succeed? And the problem in New York and some of these other, teams is, the answer is, they hadn't done a lot. In fact, if anything, they did the exact opposite. They almost worked against their own team to then put the right guys in front, because they never built up their lines. They basically got flashy players because that shut up the media.
Yeah, that's the New York way.
Oh, look, you got the the amazing wide receiver. Oh, you got the tight end that everyone was talking about. Woo! And
Who's
then
throwing him the ball?
and then it's like, who's throwing in the ball? And it's like, well, it doesn't matter who's throwing in the ball because you basically have wet paper bags in front of your quarterback and they're getting killed.
Well, yeah, it's a sense of urgency. So a great example, let's go back to the Jets.
Yeah.
I mean, their offensive line was horrid. And then, of course, now, they get rid of Wilson and now Rodgers has come back. They signed 2 free agent tackles and they drafted a tackle on top of that.
Like they took Tyron Smith, who is a hell of a tackle, but I don't think the guy has played a full season in the last 5 years.
Well, neither was the other guy they got from New England.
Yeah.
Same kind of thing. And I think that's why they drafted. They said, you know what? We've had enough of this. We got Rodgers hurt, on the 4th play of the season?
Yes.
And Zach Wilson got, crushed. So, yeah, we're going to solidify that position. So, yeah, if you got a young QB, you got to put the pieces around him in order for that to work.
Yep. But what they've done with the tackles there is they got 2 guys in Smith and the other guy there that they brought in.
It's probably high on peyote.
We'll just say it's possible that you're right. I think that Peyton is a very balanced coach in his assessment. I think he is very level-headed in how he assesses things. You saw that when he was willing to take the heat for moving on from Russell Wilson, despite what was going to be an absolute media firestorm, right? Like he knew exactly what was coming his way. And
he took it.
If anything, that should show other teams like the Steelers and others that, you need to be very careful with Russell Wilson because it seems like nobody loves Russell Wilson as much as Russell Wilson loves him some Russell Wilson.
Absolutely.
Right. And
yeah.
And so the problem is that when you're dealing with someone who is intentionally willing, wanting, and unwilling to tell everyone else around him to stop shining the spotlight and stop, releasing all this bad stuff. If anything, Russell Wilson's encouraging it because, you've got to think that he's not letting that kind of stuff get out there unless he approves it because it's going to impact him. Right. So I think that is a huge red flag in terms of what you saw and then all the negative press and all this. Well, I can still do all this and I can still all do that. Well, no, no, because the stats don't prove what you're saying on these other podcasts when you're doing a world tour. The stats paint a completely different picture, which is you can't do the things you claim you can.
That's why I can't wait for your Pittsburgh Steeler buddy to come on and see, have him say what he's seen with Russell Wilson, in their camp. That's going to be very interesting. That's going to be fun to see if he's saying the same thing.
Yeah. And so I think Russell Wilson is fairly well suited for these AFC North teams because they build the offensive lines and they build the defensive lines. And so what Pittsburgh has that Denver didn't is an absolute elite level pass rush and defense. Like their defense is lights out.
Yeah, I mean they got TJ Watt, so
yeah,
they basically have the best edge rusher.
Yeah,
one of the best. Sorry,
in the
Jack.
NFL. Yeah,
I was about ready to correct you, but
I saw it. Saw it formulating.
Yeah, but you have a team that's got an absolute stellar defense that rushes the quarterback very well and successfully. So they're going to get you the ball back. They're going to be able to cover up mistakes. They're going to get you short fields. They're going to get you stuff like that. And they're going to probably get a turnover score, once every 3 or 4 games anyway. And so that's going to really help your team and alleviate the pressure from Russell Wilson, which then allows him to be able to play fast and loose. It then enables him to not have to be as controlled with the ball. And I think that it's going to better suit him. So think of Russell Wilson when Marshawn Lynch was the running back.
Well, and you got to think too, like they made the playoffs last year with Kenny Pickett at quarterback. And Mason Rudolph, I guess. But so it's not like they need, elite caliber quarterbacking to make it to the playoffs. I'm curious too when we get the Steelers guy on how he thinks it'll play out with Fields and Wilson, because I don't think there's no scenario where we don't see both of them play, because they're both basically on a 1-year tryout, and I don't see Pittsburgh making the move to bring both of them in without the intention of, okay, one of these guys will be our guy next year. So there's got to be a way with the 17 games that they figure out, how. I think Russ probably starts, but I could see it being a very short leash. And once one bad loss happens, all right, Fields.
Yeah, absolutely. And you got to give your coach credit. Richie, and seeing that going, he's not doing what he needs to do, and you got to go. And I got to say the same thing for my head coach, with Jimmy G. The same thing. You see it or you don't see it. Combination of both. You got to go. And then going to AOC 12, he was a third stringer. And then bringing him, going saying right from day one, he's my guy. So, these guys got the eye for talent. They know.
Yep. Well, I mean, even Bill Belichick with Tom Brady. Tom Brady was a string with the Patriots.
Sixth rounder.
Well, he was a sixth rounder, but he was third string.
Drew Bledsoe's spot.
Yeah. So that's what I'm saying is that, these coaches that have an eye for a combination of work ethic and talent, they can identify it, and they can identify it when it's in front of them. The problem is bringing it in the first place is the challenge. Once it's in the building, a lot of them can identify it quite quickly. So anyways, guys, we're going to kind of end the show there. I think we had a great discussion in terms of all of the different things and what we're going to be expecting, and even some added bonus bonus banter there at the end, which is always fun. But next week we're gonna really try to push to get some other interesting content for you guys. And this is the interesting time of the year. This is where, yes, I do. Yeah, somewhere he did. But in terms of the show, we're going to bring some interesting stuff next week. If there is news that you would like us to cover on the show, please reach out to any of us on X. We'll bring it up and get it on the show. Obviously, some news makes it to the big stage, and other news kind of gets tamped down, so we don't hear. So if you happen to come across any of those news stories, go ahead and bring it on over, and we will bring it up on the show. And ladies and gentlemen, until next week, where the West Side is the best side. Peace.
Fast lane when I pass in the street, bag of money in the passenger seat. Tempo's been asking for me on the road from the west to the east. Way up, I might never come down, cause the coast racking up the flame out. So high, I might never come down, so what, this is my lifestyle. Wait a minute,